Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Thank you for your time. Goodbye. Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. There's absolutely no doubt that the political crisis in Maharashtra is the most serious the state has suffered, perhaps in its 62 years history since foundation. And yet on television, it's increasingly being portrayed as a tamasha, a spectacle, and sometimes even as a ludicrous circus. So today we ask, given that Maharashtra is perhaps India's richest state, certainly one of its most important states, what do we mean and how should we understand Maharashtra politics? And what are the hidden implications of the crisis in Mumbai? Those are the key issues I shall raise today with one of India's foremost political scientists, the chief editor of studies in Indian politics and the director of the Lokniti program on comparative democracy, Professor Suhas Palshikar. Professor Palshikar, let's start with that obvious question. Clearly, this is the most serious crisis Maharashtra has experienced in the 62 years since its foundation, and yet on television, every night for the last week, it's been portrayed as a tamasha, a spectacle, even at times a ludicrous circus. From your vantage point in Pune, how do you view what's happening in your state? How do you understand the deeper implications of the crisis in Maharashtra?
Well, I agree with you in the first place that this is a severe crisis. And maybe in the 1980s, when Indira Gandhi tried to destabilize the Maratha leadership of the state, there was something similar to this happening. Thanks to television, though, today we are witnessing something as in the form of a spectacle rather than a mere crisis. Now, this crisis really means that the party system, which was for the last 2 decades more or less a bipolar system, 4 parties, 2 parties on one side and 2 parties more or less on the other side, that party system is on the brink of a breakdown. And that would also mean that we would find it difficult to form a government. It would be even more difficult to have a stable government, and probably an impossibility that the government would have a certain vision of its own to implement when in power. So that is the state of affairs that we are currently in.
Let me put to you some critical questions that are being debated on television and in the newspapers as well every single day. The first, I suppose, is the question, are Eknath Shinde and his supporting MLAs guilty of breaching Section 2(1)(a) of the 10th schedule because their refusal to attend critical meetings in Mumbai and their consorting with the BJP in Surat and Guwahati is tantamount to voluntarily giving up membership of their own party? What are your thoughts on this key issue? Because the future of the government will critically depend on whether they're guilty of breaching this clause of the 10th schedule or not.
See, there can be different opinions on the effectiveness of the anti-defection law that is in place. But as it stands today, I think it is fairly clear that the MLAs, the rebel as they are called, the rebel MLAs have definitely violated the anti-defection law by not attending the party meeting and inviting this possible action against them.
And in fact, what you're saying corresponds with at least two judicial determinations, one made in 2010 in Karnataka, another made in 2017 in Tamil Nadu by the respective state high courts. And then it corresponds even more closely with what Mr. Venkaiah Naidu, the present vice president, decided in the Sharad Yadav case. He was declared to have lost his membership of the Rajya Sabha because he attended a rally hosted by Lalu Prasad Yadav. Similarly, consorting with the BJP in Surat and in Guwahati is tantamount to consorting with political opponents and seeking to undermine your government. Clearly, the logic that applied in one case must apply in the other as well.
Indeed, and more than that, the claim that the Eknath Chandra group is making that they don't want any change in the government merely because they don't want Uddhav Thackeray to be the leader. But more than that, what they want is that there should be an alliance with the BJP. Now, this decision, this claim or this demand is clearly in violation of the current stand of the Shiv Sena for the last 2.5 years. And therefore, as you point out, they have really gone on the wrong side of the current provisions.
Quite right. They are critically opposed to an alliance which is absolutely central to the government the Shiv Sena has formed. Therefore, their opposition means they are opposed to the government. Therefore, they become defectors. Once again, that logic is crystal clear. But let me, Professor Sahab, put the opposite to you. Almost 40 of Uddhav Thackeray's MLAs have joined Shinde. I'm told by the Indian Express that every single minister in the Legislative Assembly, apart from Aaditya Thackeray, has actually sided with Shinde as well. Even if this group cannot get the protection of the 2/3 clause because they haven't as yet merged with any other party, do we need a new way of thinking of a split that is so substantial? After all, we're talking of a split that is now well above 2/3 of the legislature size of the party.
See, that's why when I answered your earlier question, I prefaced it by saying that there can be differences of opinion about the current anti-defection law. To my mind, the anti-defection law has failed to stop defections, and it has become counterproductive in many respects. And therefore, there can be a larger debate, which is apart from the crisis that Maharashtra is facing. But that debate has to take place as to how do we understand the idea of a split in a party as different from rebellion or defection.
You're making a very important point. First, as you said earlier, these MLAs have clearly violated the Anti-Defection Act by failing to attend critical meetings in Mumbai and by consorting with the BJP in Surat and Guwahati. But separately, you're also saying that when you have a split of this size, we need to be able to review the act to find out how do we judge, how do we determine, how do we respond to splits of this size. Because at the moment, after Mr. Vajpayee amended the act in 2003, splits are not feasible, only mergers are. We need now to ask ourselves that question, do splits need to be brought back in some sense?
Surely, and there's also a second question that needs to be asked about the anti-defection law, which is that, does it really stop defections? In the sense that, does it really penalize the MLA who defects from the parent party? Supposing these were not 40, but just 4 MLAs and they defected, would they still become minister in a future government? Or would there be a ban on becoming minister and holding offices, positions of office? This act has failed to stop that as well. So it's neither here nor there.
Absolutely. And what happened in Karnataka 2 years ago is a classic example of how defecting MLAs can resign, get re-elected, they can become ministers before their re-election, and thus circumvent what is the intention of the Anti-Defection Act, which is to stop defection. But in this instance, in the Karnataka instance, it almost worked as if it was facilitating defection. But let me put one more different question to you. Given the situation we face, is there any way that the Maha Vikas Aghadi government can survive? Or is its doom foretold?
I think when 40 of your 55 odd MLAs have different views from the mainstream or the leadership, I don't see any chance for the Maha Vikas Aghadi to survive this crisis smoothly and in a fair manner. They can use various provisions of the act but I don't know how long they can prolong this situation of limbo, this situation of being a powerless government. So the days of the Mahavikas Agadi are surely numbered, and that is really the main outcome, to my mind, of this entire spectacle that is unfolding.
That's another very important answer, Professor Palshikar, because you're saying that even if the court permits, before a vote of no confidence is held, for the defection notices against the MLAs to be considered, and they are now deemed to have defected and therefore they no longer count as members, even if that allows an escape route for now, looking down the road, after you've lost 40 of your MLAs, the days in power of the Vikas Agadi government are limited. It may escape this particular problem, but it can't ensure that it has a long future ahead. Certainly not till the next election is due in 2.5 years' time.
Sure.
Then at that point, let's come not to the legal issues we've been discussing or the political issues, but let's talk about the Shiv Sena, which is the party bang at the center of the crisis. Its MLAs and its MLCs have certainly split with the leadership, but it seems party workers, party cadres and corporators have stayed loyal to Uddhav Thackeray. A, is that impression true? And B, if it is, how do you view it?
No, to your first original question, I would say that while in Mumbai, the corporators seem to be with Uddhav Thackeray still, the picture in the various other districts of the state is not very clear as to whether the district chiefs of the party everywhere are with the leadership or with the rebels. That is not really clear. And I guess they are also waiting and watching the situation because they wouldn't want really to go with a group which doesn't have the charisma of the Thackeray name, the Thackeray brand, so to say. But at the same time, they also don't want to go with a leader who probably will be losing power very soon. So they are in a position of dilemma to my mind, and they are waiting. I'm not so confident, however, that all the district chiefs would go with Uddhav Thackeray. And in that sense, this is a genuine vertical split in the party. Going to the bottom, each district unit of the party would get split very soon.
In which case, what you're saying means that the degree to which the split has gone and how far it has divided the party is perhaps much deeper and more worrying than is apparent at the moment on the surface to people who are not in Maharashtra. Because if district chiefs in rural areas are affected and may choose not to side with Uddhav Thackeray, he has a serious problem on his hands.
I think he himself has admitted to this a couple of days ago in a statement where he said that we will build the party afresh. That is a clear signal, I guess, from him as well, that he is aware of the fact that the party has split very deeply and something very drastic needs to be done in order to still survive in this midst.
I'll come to Uddhav Thackeray in a moment's time, Professor Palshikar, but let's first focus briefly on Eknath Shinde and the bunch of MLAs, maybe 40 in all, who are supporting him. If they are required to merge with the BJP or some other third party as a way of retaining their seats, particularly because they also begin to realize that they may be found guilty of having breached the Anti-Defection Act, then in those circumstances after they've merged, can they still claim to be loyal Shiv Senics, true to Balasaheb Thackeray's legacy, and will their electoral standing in their constituencies be damaged?
Oh yes, that's a very critical dilemma for them. And you would notice that from the moment when the media started talking about this aspect, that they have to merge with some party and can't claim that they are the Shiv Sena, or as Eknath Chandra once said initially, theirs is the Shiv Sena B standing for Balasaheb Thackeray. That was the game plan, and that has not worked very clearly because of the anti-defection law provisions. Once they lose this name, once they lose this title to the party's name as Shiv Sena, I think much of their enthusiasm would decline, and they would also receive a setback in their respective constituencies.
Now, Eknath
Chandra, for example, comes from the Thane-Mumbai belt, and it is there that the name of the party is so important that if he joins BJP or any other party, he would have lost credibility and identity.
This is again another very important, interesting answer, because once the MLAs, particularly Mr. Shinde himself, whose example you took, realize that they could fall foul of the Anti-Defection Act, and the choice that they're left with is either to merge with another party to survive and retain their seats or to return to the fold, there'll be a lot of pressure, not on Mr. Shinde perhaps, but on many of the others supporting him to return to the fold, because they will not want to lose either 2.5 years more in the assembly, nor face the risk of an election where they are not deemed to be Shiv Senics and their association with Balasaheb Thackeray is suddenly thrown into terrible question. So there's a huge dilemma facing them as well.
Sure.
Let's then at this point return to Uddhav Thackeray, because I noticed that this case is not just in front of the Supreme Court in Delhi, it's also been moved in front of the Election Commission. Now, at the moment, we don't know what the Election Commission is thinking, leave aside what the Election Commission will do. But were the commission to freeze either the party's name or its symbol, how much of a setback would that be for Uddhav Thackeray? Because his party critically depends both on the name and the symbol.
I guess symbol can be something that he will be able to negotiate with. But if the name of the party is frozen, which would be a drastic step to my mind, but one can't be so sure about what the Election Commission would take a decision. If the name of the party is frozen, that would definitely be a setback, because the phenomenon that Mr. Balasaheb Thackeray produced is equivalent to the name Shiv Sena. And therefore, although Uddhav Thackeray may claim that he is the legal heir of that Shiv Sena itself, he would still be unable to emotively attract the public. In the absence of this name, there is some magic, at least in parts of Maharashtra, not everywhere, some magic associated with this term Shiv Sena. And without that, it would be a gigantic task for someone like Uddhav Thackeray to really revive the party.
Let's focus a little deeper on Uddhav Thackeray, Professor Palshikar. Looking back, was it a mistake to form a coalition with the NCP in Congress? The impression that was given at that time was that there was a dilution taking place of the Shiv Sena's commitment to Hindutva, whilst the party was allying with its traditional opposition rather than with its allies. Worse still, thereafter, some people are saying that Uddhav Thackeray may have given priority to his personal ambition to become chief minister rather than to his commitment to his party's ideology. So was it a mistake to ally with NCP in Congress?
It depends on how one looks at what Uddhav Thackeray was trying to do, because of course his personal ambition to become chief minister was an important factor. But at the same time, I guess there was a sense that Shiv Sena was being sort of sidelined and eroded in the BJP Shiv Sena coalition. And that is why, as a precautionary measure, he decided to break the alliance with the BJP and go with the Congress parties, the Congress and the NCP. I don't know, therefore, whether it was a mistake. If one looks at Uddhav Thackeray's political trajectory, ever since he came onto the scene, he has done 2 or 3 things to the Shiv Sena. One is that he has really moderated the stand of the party on the question of Marathi identity. The second is the street politics of the Shiv Sena has also been made moderate, and in its place, routine normal politics has been given an upper hand in the party. And thirdly, he himself has never really capitalized on the Hindutva that Shiv Sena was associated with. In view of these 2 or 3 things that he has done, I think it was logical for him to go with the other 2 Congress parties so as to protect the Shiv Sena from the BJP. That's my sense of how the alliance took place.
But you're saying something once again which is fascinating. Because of the way his thinking was evolving, and behind that evolution in his thinking is actually a fairly significant shift away from the traditional positions his party, particularly under his father, have taken. Because of the way his thinking was evolving, it made logical sense to ally with the NCP in Congress. In other words, the change in his thinking, the change in the way he conducts his politics preceded and therefore justified the alliance he made with NCP in Congress.
Yeah, I would think so. Most of our political leaders don't theorize necessarily what they are doing. But sitting in our comfort zones, if we look at what they are doing, I think we need to understand that there is a logic to their actions. And Uddhav Thackeray can be understood not only by the moment when he broke the alliance with the BJP, but as a long-term leader of the Shiv Sena, even when his father was around.
Let me ask you a different question about Uddhav Thackeray. By getting involved in government as chief minister, and then I suppose facing COVID, the worst challenge that any chief minister could have faced in recent years, coupled with his own ill health, did Uddhav Thackeray and perhaps even his son Aditya lose critical contact with MLAs and perhaps more importantly with critical sections of the Shiv Sena organization? Because that is something the MLAs who've gone to Guwahati keep accusing him of.
I think, yes, there is an element of truth in that. Not so much because of the circumstances, but also because of the style of politics that he evolved after becoming chief minister has produced a disconnect between the party and Uddhav Thackeray, the leader. This is a sense not only of the MLAs who are now publicly criticizing him, but I guess this is also a sense of many ground level workers of the party as well. This change, in a sense, is inevitable, and he was unable to overcome that difference. Once you have become a leader of the government, you have so many responsibilities that you get bogged down, and he did get bogged down by those formalities of becoming a chief minister and conducting himself as a chief minister.
So in a brief word, his eye was taken off the organization board.
Right.
Looking down the road, how do you see Uddhav Thackeray's future? Do you believe that this man has the talent, the skill, the personality, and the grit and determination to rebuild Humpty Dumpty? Because at the moment, Humpty Dumpty Shiv Sena is badly broken. Can Uddhav Thackeray rebuild it?
I think the most important takeaway from this entire development is what the BJP wanted to do has happened, namely weakening the Shiv Sena. I am not too certain that Uddhav Thackeray would be able to rebuild a party from this point onwards to a position of becoming the steering party, the party which has the steering wheel of the governance or politics of the state. I am sure Shiv Sena will not disappear, but at the same time, remember that Shiv Sena today is, if not number one in the numerical sense, the number one party in the state in terms of power. That position is lost, and I am not certain that Uddhav Thackeray would have the capacity to bring the party quickly back to that position. It would be a long, long road for him, and that is where the question that you are asking becomes very relevant. He might have the patience himself, but his cynics might not have that patience to wait to re-emerge after 10 years. He might also have the vision for the party, particularly his son might have the vision for the party, but they, having lost the emotional connect with the Shiv Sainik, that would be very difficult to bring that vision into a reality.
So even if Uddhav and Aditya Thackeray have the patience, the grit, the determination and the passion, do their followers have the patience to wait that long? And will their followers be loyal when perhaps the political stream is moving further and further closer to the BJP? The challenge is not just one to do with Uddhav Thackeray's talents and personality. The challenge is also to do with how he's perceived by the people of Maharashtra and whether his followers believe in him.
Yeah, and also you need a network of organization people around you who would then rebuild the party from the present crisis. And I don't see any such network available to Uddhav Thackeray of organization people. You don't have only to have spokespersons who are smart enough to fend off journalists' queries. You need people who work very quietly on the ground in each district. And that is where he might have probably a major handicap.
Quite right. In which case, let me ask you bluntly, are we witnessing what in popular terms would be called the decline and fall of the Thackeray dynasty, playing out slowly, painfully, but dramatically on our television screens night after night?
I'm extremely wary of making predictions But I would slightly modify your question and say that it's definitely a huge setback. I'm calling it setback instead of decline because given the age of Aditya Thackeray and the experience that he has already cultivated over the last few years, there would be a long way for him to conduct his politics in the future. I don't think, therefore, that there would be for the Thackeray dynasty as such, for the Thackeray family as such, a complete decline and fall. But a major period of setback is on the cards.
In which case, you're saying the future of the Thackeray family or dynasty depends critically on Aditya Thackeray, not
rather than his father. Rather than his father, yes, Aditya.
So if there is a future, the future is the son.
Yeah.
Professor Palshikar, I thank you very much for this analysis of what is happening in Maharashtra and for making time to share it with us. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Thank you for your time. Goodbye.